saw this and I just thought it was a really interesting discussion. And I thought I'd show you. I'm not sure if you saw it or not. But basically,
It's like
Jesse,
here's one quarterback with this stat. Here's
yeah.
another
So
quarterback with that
yeah.
stat.
So
Which
he
quarterback that you like, and then the one that you don't like is always Brock Purdy. Have you
so you
noticed that?
got
Have you
two
noticed that?
it's
I
yeah.
mean, I will say that Jesse's done the same thing like 9 times, and the quarterback that always has the stats that you wouldn't take is always Brock Purdy.
Well, I haven't seen him do it other than I haven't been checking if he's been doing it. But
It's I always know when I see it. It's like two quarterbacks, and here's stat line. Here are the stat lines, and the guy who has the worst stat line will always be Brock Purdy, and then the other quarterback will either be somebody
well,
else.
I mean, not that I've never seen Jesse do this, but I've just seen these been done before, and it's always the quarterback. It's always the stats that you were like, oh, it's always meant to paint a picture. So like the stats that you obviously would choose are like opposing a quarterback that's good versus a quarterback
Right,
that's bad. It's like, oh
right.
wait, you would rather have Jared Goff than Patrick Mahomes? Like, oh, like, but anyways, these are some statistics. I'll just read them out if anyone's listening. You got 4,200 passing yards for quarterback A with 29 passing touchdowns, 14 interceptions, a 69% completion percentage. And this is the little wild card that I am kind of interested in. It says 4 game-winning drives, which is an interesting stat. I just think I'll just throw that out. I think that's an interesting stat. Quarterback B, 4,300, almost 4,400 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 68% completion percentage, and 0 game winning drives. Who do you take? 63% of people took quarterback A.
Because the numbers are all totally the same except for the game winning drives.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. The only thing that would you see the game-winning drives, and it's like it's not really a real. I mean, it's a statistic. Obviously, anything could be a
Well,
statistic,
it's
but
one of these cherry picked stats. I mean, nothing against Jesse, but if you drive the length of the field on the first drive of the game, and you score a touchdown, and then you drive the full length of the field on the second drive of the game, and you score a touchdown, and then you wind up winning 17-14, but then your field goal drive at the end, the only other scoring drive, happened in the fourth quarter, then you have a game winning drive. But if your field goal happened in the first quarter, that's not a game winning drive. I mean, to me, it's like the points are points, whether you score them in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, or the fourth quarter. And it's like, also, are we dealing with, what is the one thing that I need to see there as well is I'd rather have the guy who has no game winning drives in the fourth quarter if he's got a better record, because that means he played well enough to not even need to have a game winning drive. His team, if he's got a good record, then I'd rather have the guy who has no game winning drives in the fourth quarter, because that means the game's over in the fourth quarter. That's why he doesn't have any game winning drives, because guy's got a fat record. If a guy's won like 80% of his games or some, gaudy number, but he doesn't have fourth quarter comebacks, is he even trailing in the fourth quarter? What if they're winning all the time in the fourth quarter?
yeah, no, that's I think that's where I would like to see this poll done again, but taking out the game-winning drives because again, like you said,
Or just give
what?
us the overall record of the quarterback,
Yeah,
so at least we can compare how many game, because right now we don't know, we don't know the sample size, and we don't know how many games we're talking about. And what if the person's if you have 4 come from behind wins, but you only have 4 wins and you have 16 losses, and you have those same stats, as opposed to a guy who has maybe one fourth quarter comeback, but he's won 85% of his starts. That seems kind of like a key, even though the win stat is not necessarily the quarterback stat. I know lots of personnel people who believe that the win stat is the most vital of the quarterback stats.
well, that year, just before I spoil it, quarterback A was from the 2019 season. I'll just spoil it. It's 2019 Jimmy versus 2023 Brock. But 2019, the Niners did win 13 games. They went 13-3, so that they did win a lot of games. I just think The game-winning drive stat is a little bit misleading because you see 4 game-winning drives, which seems like a hell of a lot more than 0. And these numbers are extrapolated out. So Brock would have had 1 if Jake Moody makes that field goal, which would have extrapolated to probably 3. So then it's like it's a whole different debate. So there's a lot of things. And I know that Jesse wasn't trying to make like a solid point, but I think it's more just I think the interesting thing is looking at the passing touchdowns and the passing yards. They're pretty similar, but the eye test tells you that Brock Purdy's been playing a little bit better.
I mean, I think Brock Purdy is a lot better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
A lot better.
Sorry, if I said little, I meant a lot.
Yeah, I think he's a lot better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I don't necessarily need the numbers to show me. I just think he's a lot better based on the way he runs the play action. The way he runs the quick game. His understanding of his ability to turn his back on the defense on the play action, flip back around, know where everybody is, and get rid of it in a second. His escape ability, his accuracy, his timing, his off schedule throwing. I mean, his late in the down throwing is already. I mean, we're talking about a younger player that should be less developed, and yet he's better in many of those categories than Jimmy. So, but interesting stuff nonetheless. And Bazzi Mian says, how much of Brock's fourth quarter rating is influenced by him being taken out in blowouts, so worse performances are disproportionately represented? Well, that's interesting too. He hasn't been taken out of anything really, other than what Sam Darnold came in this game and in the Dallas game. So, or is that it? Or was there a third game where we saw Darnold?
How much of Brock?
So he's basically saying that they're taking out Brock when in the fourth quarter, when all the advantages, the defense knows that you're probably going to run and to put the game away.
He's had some bad fourth quarters for sure. I'd say if his touchdown numbers or his passing yards are down, that's probably because they're running the ball more in the later halves. When
he had the lowest number of pass attempts of any quarterback in football going into that Dallas game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So it's like it's kind of like two things. It's either that they're winning by so much that they're running, or he's just played bad in 3 fourth quarters too. So it's like that's probably why his numbers look terrible. He also dealt with the concussion in the fourth quarter of the Vikings game.
Well, they've had two kinds of games. They've had games where they're trying to come from behind. They don't have tons of speed. And it's like, Brock, make a play, like it was in the Cincinnati game. And then there's a lot of games this year where the Niners have been up by 10, 12, 14 points, and they're just running and just kind of willing to kind of have they're trying to make first downs, but they're up by multiple scores and they're not really trying to put anything new on tape. They're just running the ball and punting. And so it's like he's not in both situations. He's not getting a lot done. Now, how about if they went to a fourth quarter where it was, a 1-point game, 2-point game, and he had to stay aggressive? Maybe the numbers would look a little different. Instead, he's been involved in two kinds of games: blowouts in his favor, and hey, chase, trying to make something happen.
Yeah.
I mean, his best fourth quarter numbers, I guarantee you, are in that Cincinnati game. And yet that wasn't his best fourth quarter. You could argue that was his worst fourth quarter, but his numbers were the best in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, you're probably
as
right.
far as yards and that kind of thing.
Maybe the Rams game, maybe
that Ram game. But I think the guy's proven that he can play under pressure. So it's like the question is not, to me, it's like, do you think that he can't play under pressure? Or do you think that he just doesn't have fourth quarter comebacks because Moody missed the kick and he hasn't played a lot of football and they haven't been trailing? I mean, he did bring him back in Vegas from 10 down in the fourth quarter to force overtime and then beat the Raiders that afternoon.